I've just come across a video that I want to talk about. This guy I've kind of been following because he seems more rational than some of the other Christians, but he still isn't preaching the truth. He's not as annoying or as aggravating or as insane as some of them, but he's still preaching the wrong things. But I just want to just show it.
Check out this clip of one of the first times I've got to preach on a Sunday morning at my home church. Can I tell you guys an embarrassing story? Everyone's like, yeah. So I told you guys that I grew up single parent home and mom's an alcoholic and didn't make the best decisions with finances, didn't really have a lot of wisdom. And we got married. I got married at 23. My wife was 21 and we
So I noticed how you start off the story, you're talking about yourself, but you start the story off criticizing your mum. Your mum makes bad decisions, your mum does this, your mum does this, I know you're only a kid, so you can't really blame yourself at this point, but I just wanted to point that out. You're talking to a group of people, and you start talking about your childhood, and the first thing you say is how your mum made loads of bad decisions, and you're just kind of insulting your mum in front of a group of people. If I was talking to a group of people, I would not start off. I'd be blunt, but I would try and whatever.
A couple years into our marriage, we decided that we were going to start handling our finances God's way. I had made every dumb decision there is to make with money. I bought a brand new couple.
So in there, you said you want to handle your financial situations God's way, and then you start saying you made loads of bad financial choices. I mean, what the hell? Like, seriously, did you just say that I wanted to handle things God's way, and then I started making terrible decisions? You wanted to do things your way. Oh, and you said that straight after you just insulted your mum.
Married at 23, my wife was 21, and we a couple years into our marriage, we decided that we were going to start handling our finances God's way. I had made every dumb decision there is to make with money. I bought a brand new car when I was like 21 with 0 miles on it because I needed a reliable vehicle that I couldn't afford. I racked up credit card debt. I took out student loan debt. I did everything, and the dumbest thing I did is I actually co-signed on a condo with my mom right before the housing bubble crash. Yeah, you guys can see where this is going, right?
Well, not really, but you signed a contract. You got a loan out to help your mum out so that you could afford to live with your mum's house, but then you found a girlfriend and you realised you rather lived with your girlfriend, and then to me it sounds like you just kind of dumped your mum and tried to forget about the loan and the agreement that you had just made with a bank. You had made an agreement with a bank saying that I am going to pay off, or we are going to pay off this mortgage, and then you found a girlfriend and you realised that actually I don't really want to have anything to do with this, and you thought you could just walk away from that agreement and just find a partner. That's just what you think.
So the 2005, 6, and then the '08 recession, the housing bubble crash. And so what I did, I had moved out, and my mom had her adjustable mortgage rate go through the roof. So it went from like a number she could afford to then like her mortgage like doubled. So she couldn't afford it. I had moved out. So she just stops paying the mortgage, right? Completely stops paying the mortgage. And she also stopped paying the HOA fees. Stops paying everything. And I had co-signed on this loan. And all of a sudden, we're finally getting our finances in order. So we're following the Dave Ramsey baby steps that we talk about in FPU. We got our $1,000 emergency fund. We got our budget. We're debt snowball.
Strange how you said, so I was paying for everything. And then it's like, then you start confessing that actually you weren't paying for anything. You were just, you weren't paying for anything. You just want to try and make you're trying to place all the blame on your mum. Your mum wasn't paying the bills, and you just thought, I'll just let her do what she wants, and I'm just not going to pay the bills. That's kind of, instead of doing what you should have done, which is to encourage her. I'm on this mortgage too. I can't afford to pay this. You have to pay this, otherwise the debt's going to fall onto me. If you have a contract and I've got a mortgage with someone, and that person is 80 and not working, it's going to fall on you. If they die and your name is on that contract, it will fall on you, and you need to honor the contract. You shouldn't be allowed to make contracts if you're planning on just finding a partner and running off with that partner and forgetting about the person that you made the contract with. You know, contracts are real, and you shouldn't just insult your mum for not paying, because technically you made that agreement that if she can't pay, you have to pay. That is part of an agreement. It reminds me of what my sister would do. You know, I signed an agreement to pay for the rent with these people. But the other people don't actually have their signature on the contract. You know, I'll just have my signature on the contract, and they told me that they'll pay the rent. And okay, if they don't pay the rent, it's going to fall on me. But they're not going to be serious. I just won't pay the bill. If there's people, if I choose not to stay in that house, and the other people that I was going to rent with to choose to live there, and if I move out, you know, and they don't pay the bills, you know, I'm not going to pay the bill because it's not my responsibility, even though you're the one that signed the contract. You know, my advice for this is quite serious. You know, if you sign a contract where you agree to pay back something, you need to stick with that agreement, because it's unfair on other people who would have wanted to buy that house. You know, if you've taken a property off the market because you have made an agreement with the bank that you will pay it, you know, you can't just say, oh, if I can't pay it, and if I move out and if I'm not using it, then I'll just forget about it. You know, you've taken the house off the market because someone else, a market that someone else would have wanted to have. They would have wanted your house if you weren't able to sign that. So to think that it's fine to just walk away from your responsibility, no, it's not.
Balling our debts. We're about halfway through the process. I think we paid off maybe like 20 grand at this point. And all of a sudden, there's this lurking situation in the background, like a monster from the upside down of Stranger Things, just lurking in the background. And I start getting notices. Hey, you're responsible for this year of HOAs, $1,200. And I go, okay, I open it down. But there's a catch. They misspelled my name. I'm looking at this and I'm like, this isn't me. This says Ruslan Karoglanov. I'm Ruslan Karoglanov. I'm scheming, right? Those notices.
You know that's you. So what if there's a spelling mistake? I mean, I can't remember people's names. If you are insulting me and I can't remember your name, does that actually mean that you can be let off all the insults that you give me just because I can't remember your name? And your name seems very Rusluk. I can't even say it. You just said it. And Ruslav, Kane, something. I don't know. I can't remember. I've got a really bad memory when it comes to names. But yeah, you're making a joke out of it. But you're also saying that, oh, I'm going to be a bit schemy. They've spelt my name wrong, so I'm going to use this as an excuse not to pay the rent. I mean, you said you paid back 20 grand of it, so maybe you were living with your parents, and I'm not. Was it you who paid all of that 20, or was that share part of your mum's? Did your mum pay half and you paid half, and you were living together, hence you were paying the bill, and then as soon as you left, you were like, well, I'm not going to pay the bill any longer, and then your mum stopped paying the bill, and then you found yourself into a bit of a trouble because instead of encouraging her to pay the bill, knowing that it's going to fall onto you if she doesn't pay, you know, your idea was to just abandon it and just assume that because there's a letter or two wrong in your name, you're going to try and cheat the banks and use that as an excuse to not pay your debts.
Escalate. So now it goes into collections. So now I'm getting notices, and it's the collections thing. Then they escalate. All of a sudden, I'm getting sued. Go to court. My name is misspelled. This isn't me. What are you talking about? So I ignore it. All along, we're following the baby steps. We're paying off our debts, and I get debts sent to me that I'm legally responsible for. So I keep ignoring it. All of a sudden, the court date starts.
You know, that's not how debts work. You can't just say, oh, I've got 6 debts, I'm going to pay 3 of them this month, and I'm not going to pay the biggest one, or you know, I'm going to pay off I own 6,000 student loan, and I own 6,000 in other debts, and I've bought that car, so I've got another one there, so I'll pay off all that, but I'm just not going to pay the mortgage, and I'm going to to think that I'm in the right for doing this. And you're going to do it God's way, really? Is this God's way?
Get hit with a judgment. And I'm like, still not me, bud. And then one day my wife calls me and she goes, hey, I just tried to use the debit card and I couldn't. I called the bank and all the money is taken out of our account. And they said that our accounts are levied. And I was like, levied?
So basically they've just gone into your accounts and taken all the money, which is good. That's how it should be. I mean, I would be curious to know how much effort the banks have to go through to be able to get this, because it should be allowed. People shouldn't be allowed to just take out loans, borrow money, and just say, well, I'm not living in the house any longer, so I'm not going to pay the bill. You know, you're responsible to pay the bill if the other person can't, and that's how it works, and that's how it's fair, because if you didn't do that, someone else could have lived there. You know, housing is a big issue. You know, I know my sister's partner has a house in Madeira, I think. I think there, but they haven't paid all year. They haven't paid the rent all year, and according to the government, you can't get them out of the house because they've got children, and you can't. It's not legal to chuck someone out of a house. When I would disagree. There are other people that would want that house. The reason why the house market is so high is because there isn't that much availability. Now, if people just said, oh, I'm not going to pay and I'm just going to live here, well, this is partly the reason why the house market is at a high rate, because people are able to do this, and therefore by helping the family, by saying, okay, yeah, you can just live there and you don't have to pay any rent, you know, by doing that, you're actually hurting all the other families that would have wanted to live in that house. You know, houses should be available for everyone, depending on the rate, and the higher the demand, the more you can charge, and the less of the demand, the less you charge. Now it becomes a completely unfair system if you start allowing people to live in houses and not pay the mortgage, or to rent out houses and not pay the rent. And I think it's completely a good idea that there should be some sort of courting system where you can say this person has not paid the rent, or this person has not paid the mortgage, and if you can prove that they haven't, you know, these are my accounts and there's no money. This is the money that, you know, they were paying the rent or the mortgage for this year and that year, but then they stopped in the third year. You know, if you can prove that they are paying money into an account and then suddenly it disappears and there's no money, and if they can't prove that they have been paying it, then it should be very legal to just go into their account and take their money. Why? Because this shouldn't happen. You know, he's just thinking about himself. He's just thinking, I've got a new wife, I've got a new house, I've got other mortgages, I'm being a good person because I'm paying off all the other mortgages, and okay, yes, I made an agreement to pay off that mortgage, but I'm not using the house. Then they've spelt my name wrong, and I'm just going to try and be let off this. And I think that is very unfair, because he should not be greedy and as to think that I can take on more responsibility. You know, a loan is a responsibility. If you have 1 or 2 loans and you can handle that responsibility, fine. If you want to start, I know there's this pay back system where you can buy something and then pay it back over the year. You know, if you can have 100 of those, you know, buy something for £100 and then pay it back £10 a month. You know, if you've got 100 of them and you know you can handle all of them and you can pay them off, then fine. That's good, but it's your responsibility, and you can't just say I'm being a good boy because I'm paying for half of them and not the other, because that's not how it works. If you've got too many loans and you can't pay it off, you need to cut back, and you need to. And if you've got a responsibility to pay for something with someone else, and you know that person is not taking on the responsibility, you know, you can't just say, oh, well, it's not my responsibility. No, it is your responsibility. It's your responsibility to make sure that person pays. And I don't see how it's very good that banks can just go into people's accounts. I don't even know if you can do that in England. It worries me to think that you can't, because this again would be a reason why the house market is so fake. You know, houses are incredibly expensive, and I'm wondering why. And I think banks giving out huge loans to people when they can't afford to pay it back could be part of the problem as to why houses are so expensive, because people are taking out mortgages, they can't pay them back, and then they just declare bankruptcy, and can they just get away with that? or is there going to be some sort of court? Is there some sort of court system in England? I'm glad that there is in America. Is there in England? I don't know. People in England are too polite, but they're also too stupid that they don't realise that you can be helping some people and harming other people. You know, there's this, elderly residents get a cheaper pay gas. There's a thing where they said that there's not going to be a gas allowance or something for pensioners to pay their gas. There's a discount that they get, and they're not going to get it this year. And I'm jealous. What? Because you're a 60-year-old, you get to have a discount with your rent of your gas. I mean, don't you think I want a discount for my gas? Don't you think I want to be in a nice warm house? I mean, I know if you're old, you're more likely to die of it, but that's a good thing. I mean, if you're too old and you can't really get out and walk about, what's wrong with dying when you get a cold? I mean, the whole point of being old is that you die so that you can get a new body. And therefore, if you're going to use your tax allowance to keep... And I know a lot of these old people, they keep their whole house warm. They turn the heating on. They know that they're maybe a bit old, so they don't want to go around all the rooms making sure all the heaters are off. They're happy to just heat up the whole room, even though they're just staying in bed or just staying in one room. And, you know, I think a lot of people can take advantage of things like that. You know, you can help a group of people saying, right, we're going to help old pensioners keep their houses warm. They don't have much money, blah, 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 blah. But on the other hand, it's like, well, they've got a pension, they've got money coming in for doing nothing, they've had their whole life of a career, so every single year that they get to live, they've been building up money, whereas the younger people, they're far more poorer. Why? Because they don't have a house, they need to buy a house. Houses are incredibly expensive because of people taking out mortgages and thinking that they can just not pay it back, and thinking, oh, it's not my responsibility, even though it's like, well, you're responsible for that house not being on the market, and because that house is not on the market's going to be increasing. You know, it is a big problem. You can help a group of people saying, oh, they're poor, we'll let them off their mortgage, but you're not helping the rest of the people that would have wanted that house and can't have that house, hence they have to find another house, and there's more demand for other houses, hence the whole market went up. So there's this tendency to just want to think you're helping something when really you're harming it. You know, you could give old people more, make cheaper gas so that they spend more, so they feel like they can heat up their whole house. You know, I have heard my granny say that I used to always heat up my whole house, and now I'm doing it room by room. But it was only a couple of years ago, and I was just kind of thinking, oh, you used to heat up the whole house, even though my granddad died 10 years ago, but you know, he was housebound most of his life and stuff, and I just... In the future as well, you know, all the gas and fossil fuels that you're using up, you know, these might be things that people in the future generations would want, and therefore by making it easier to get access to it now, you're actually just taking it away from the people in the future. So you're saying, I'm going to help the people now who might not even appreciate it because right now it's not of a scarce, or it's not of a huge value to you. You know, in the future it's going to be worth so much more because there's going to be so much less of it, and the people in the future want it too. So it's not even just about young versus old, it's about now versus the future, and therefore you know, people need to see things from a bigger perspective. And I think if Christians stopped thinking that their way is the best way, oh, it doesn't have, it's got a misspelling on there, I'm going to use that as a way of not paying it, and I'm doing things God's way. I'm paying all my bills. You know, I've got the car loan that I had, I've got the sofa and the washing machine, I've got loans for all these different things from the new house that I bought. You know, really, it's just like, no, you need to think about the future, and you need to think, if I can't afford a second house, then my partner is going to have to live with my mum, and we'll work together, and that's not such a bad thing, because having a house, living with your parents it's conversation. You have more things to do, or more things to share between each other. So living in your own house isn't necessarily the best plan, and if living in your own house rather than with your mum is the reason why you're going to end up in huge amounts of debt, then my plan is not for you to just do that and just think that you can call this God's will or God's way. And so many people just do what they want, say things that I don't agree with, and then try and make out that this is them just doing what God is telling them to do.
A friend in high school named Levi, the teacher would mispronounce his name sometimes and say, call him Levi. I didn't know what that meant. So what I found out, what it meant, is they got this judgment against me. They were able to go into my accounts. They were able to take all of our money out, and they were able to put that towards the debt, which now grew from $1,200 to $5,000. In the process, I decided to be wise to pull up my credit. I pull up my credit. I discover that there's a second mortgage that didn't go into foreclosure. That second mortgage is $60,000. So now I'm 25, 26 at this point, and I discover that we have a crazy amount of money that I owe, and
I discovered that I have a huge amount of money that I owe, even though I was the one who was taking out 2 mortgages for 2 different properties, even though I wasn't living in one, and I also had a rack of debts from when I was younger. I didn't know this was going to happen. It just happened. It wasn't my fault. I wasn't the one who signed the contract to have all this money. It was like one minute I had all this money and the next minute they wanted it all back. Not my fault.
I was at the end of myself. I thought, this is it. Like, there's no way I'm going to be able to pay all this off. I have to file for bankruptcy. This is over for me. And he called us.
See, that is annoying. To think that you can just get into as much debt as you want and then file bankruptcy and then not have to pay it off just because you're bankrupt. I think that is incredibly unfair. It's incredibly unfair on all the people who wouldn't take out mortgages, wouldn't take out loans because they don't like the thought of not being able to pay it back. So the people who don't take out loans and mortgages because of the fear of not being able to pay it back, they're the ones that end up being punished by having such a shit life. Why? Because the people who are taking out all these mortgages get to, take out the mortgages. They get to have the safe cars. They get to have the house, the ability to heat their whole house up at the same time, whilst the people that are worried about doing the right thing and having to pay it actually back, these are the people that are not taking out loans and therefore making their life far worse because they don't like the idea of not being able to pay something back. But the ones that don't care if they don't pay it back, well, that they get to live the nice lifestyle. This is this system. If that is okay, that you can just think that you can take out loans and not have to pay it back by just claiming bankruptcy, I feel like this whole system just creates this world where the people that don't fear, people that don't care, the people that don't worry, these are the people that can just do whatever they want because they don't have the fear that it's ever going to come back on them, and this shouldn't be allowed. And if someone takes out agrees to sign a rent and then has a young child and then says, oh look, the government says that I don't have to pay rent if I can't afford it, I'm not going to pay the rent. It's like, well, the people that own the house might have a mortgage. They might have to pay off it, and even if they don't have to pay it off, this was their business, this was their career, and what, the government's going to destroy their career by saying that these people who are living in their house can just squat there because why? It's unfair for the child to move out. Well, it's unfair for the housing market to be as high as it is when people can't afford the inflated. The reason why it's high is because of people like this who are saying that I'm just going to live in this house and not pay. And therefore, by trying to help the families, you don't have to pay, don't worry. You're actually harming other families that would have wanted that house and would have been happy to pay. You need to reward people that are honest. Reward people that do fear not being able to pay their mortgage, because people who do fear not being able to pay their mortgage are going to be the ones that are being more trustworthy to actually pay it back and not just think that they can be like, oh, there's a mistake in my name. It's a very complicated name, but let's just use that as a way of proving this ain't me. I don't know what you're talking about. I didn't do that, and just lie. Christianity is a whole religion that teaches people that it's fine to lie, because these people tell people that they talk to God, that they can hear God, that they're doing things for God, when really they're doing things for their imagination. They've created something in their head and they're doing it for that. And part of this God wants you to try and win people over as much as possible, and it doesn't matter if you lie. And they don't see that as lying. They see that as just winning people over to the truth, even though they don't know it's the truth. But the thing is, these people don't care. They don't care about the truth. They don't care if this was the debt or the mortgage that they took off. They just want to live a lavish lifestyle and not think about others. And they don't realise that they're like that. That's the problem. If I told him that was quite a selfish move, I don't even think he would agree. I'm pretty sure he'd agree. But you'd have to tell him that. And if you don't tell him that, or if I did tell him that, he might even say, oh, well, others do it. Everyone else does it. And then, well, that's not an excuse to do it. This is the reason why the problem is so bad. And, but yeah. He does an advert where he tries to sell his t-shirt.
Restoration and resurrection.
It's just,
God is in the business of...
I just want to see all the things that he said about this.
LessGod.shop and get yours now.
Right? And my mindset had to change. I had to remember that God is in the power of restoration and resurrection. God is in the business of resurrection.
And because of that, you can be let off all your debt. Yeah, because that's what the Bible says. The Bible says that you have to work for 6 years, and in the 7th year, yep, just the debt just goes, because that's completely fair.
And my mindset had to change. I had to start thinking about this conniving way that I was handling money from before I was really walking with Jesus, and some of my communistic tendencies when I was a kid had to die, right? And this is what...
I think the communistic tendency is to believe that we're all equal. We're all equal. We're all fine. If I don't want to pay my bills, well, if I'm hearing that other people are just declaring bankruptcy and not paying their bills, then I will too. So it's just the belief that we're all equal, that we're all the same, hence everyone's all like me. Hence, if they're all going to be trying to cheat the system, I'm going to try and cheat the system too, because we're all the same. And therefore, what I'm doing is not wrong, because what I'm doing is what everyone else is doing. That's part of the communistic view.
We see in the scriptures where Jesus says, if you want to follow me, you are to lay down your life, pick up your cross, and follow me. Right? And
you can't follow someone unless you know who they are. I am the real Christ, and I don't actually have any loans. I don't like the idea of loans. I don't like the idea of having to be tied to someone and be forced to pay something back. I mean, technically I do massage, and that's a job that I can't even get a mortgage from, because there's no guarantee of income. And also because I was earning so little at the beginning, you know, I was only just able to afford my rent in the first... when I first moved out with my parents, I was only just able to afford my rent, and I couldn't declare the money that I was earning. Why? Because... my rent was 16,000 a year, and I was only making 20,000 a year. If I would have declared that I make 20,000 a year, I would have had to pay £4,000 in taxes, which would have basically meant that I would have earned absolutely nothing all year. Hence, I would have had no money for food, or no money for the gas bills or anything, and therefore I couldn't declare that I owned anything. And because I didn't declare I owned anything, I couldn't take out a mortgage. So. But I wouldn't have wanted to take out a mortgage. I don't believe in taking out mortgages, because mortgages are supposed to help people get housing. The problem is, if everyone starts getting a mortgage, then it's actually hurting people, and it's actually not helping people get houses. Why? Because everyone's taking out a bigger and bigger and bigger a mortgage, and then you just end up in this big corrupt system where no one actually owns their house. It's the bank that owns everything, and I don't really care. But do I actually like the people in the banks? I don't know. I don't like anyone. So I don't think it would be fair that I don't think you should be allowed to take out a mortgage that's more than 50%. If I was to change the rule, I think you should only be allowed to buy a house if you can buy half of it. I would actually want to make I know it's going to kill the banks, but hopefully in the future, after we've killed Jesus, hopefully in the future you'd actually like people. And if you actually like people, you don't want to own 80% of their house. Why would you want to own 80% of someone's house? I mean, doesn't that just make you feel like some sort of king over people? And therefore, I feel like this whole loan of mortgage, or 10% mortgage, you only need 5% and we'll pay the rest. I mean, it's a false economy. It's a false economy. These people cannot afford these houses. You're taking a risk on whether or not they actually can. It's also like going to a club or a nightclub. So if you go to a club and there's a bunch of people. I used to go to clubs and there was this singles group where you actually get a couple of free bottles of drink and you get and mixers as well. And so it makes the club look very full and very like entertaining, like wow, everyone's paying these drinks. And if when the drinks run out, when the club gets completely full, that is, you go to the bar and you realise that actually it's like £10 a drink. Okay, it's probably a lot more now. This was 10 years ago, but £10 for a glass of wine was kind of a lot for me back then. Because it was 10 years ago, this was 11, 12 years ago, a long time, 15 years ago even, I don't know, a long time ago. But yeah, it gives the deception that having this group that are having free drinks, gives the deception that the prices are normal. That these are all normal standard prices, and they're drinking and you're drinking, and so they do get a lot of deals that way. Now, I think with a club and drinking, there's nothing wrong with that. If some people are getting their drinks free and other people are paying £20 for a cocktail, which is how much the cocktails were, hence why I always went with a wine, because it was £10, which was the cheapest drink, and I didn't want to pay £20 for a cocktail, which was a lot considering this was 15 years ago. But yeah, it's just because of this, you've created like a false market. But it doesn't matter with drinks because it's just a few drinks. But with the housing market, it does matter. If some people can afford to buy their own house, then great. But if some people can only do it with a 5% or a 10% or a 20% mortgage, then they'll still do it. They'll just have a huge amount of debt. They might not be able to pay it back. Can the banks actually force them to pay it back? Well, they should. Why? Because it's unfair that they should be allowed to do this. Because the reason why that house wasn't bought by someone else and was because of it. And so say if you've got 3 or 4 people all fighting for the same house, and the price of the house goes up. Oh, we'll pay this much. No, we'll pay this much. No, we'll pay this much. And it keeps going up. And say if the person who wins says, oh, I'll just get a mortgage, and then say 5 yees later they say, oh, I can't afford, I'm going to declare bankruptcy and not pay it back. Well, that's an insult to all the other people who wanted to buy that house. If that house was going to be 200,000, it went up going for 300,000 because someone wanted it that much, and then it turns out 5 years later they don't actually pay off the mortgage, then it's an unfair purchase, because the other people who would have paid the mortgage off, they deserved it more. And you shouldn't be giving credit or rewards to people that can't pay their debts. And by having such, being able to take such large mortgages out, you need to find a way of getting this mortgage back. And I know some people do it for business purposes. You can take out a house with the intent to rent it out and then make money back through the mortgage. And say if the people in the house don't pay their rent, you might start using that as an excuse not to pay the mortgage. And I guess in that circumstance it is your fault. But at the same time, having a flat or house is a big responsibility, because getting people to pay if they can't paying the rent if you've got a big mortgage to pay, it's hard, but it's something you have to do, and it's something that the housing people, it's something that there needs to be a fairer system where people can't just get away by saying I'm poor, and because this is the reason why the problem is so great. And but yeah, this video is quite long. I'm not worried that the video is going to cut off any longer. The last computer, sometimes if it got more than 20 minutes, the video just wouldn't I'd press stop and then the video would disappear. But now that that's not happening, I can feel like I can make these videos longer, because I don't have to worry that it hasn't recorded or something. But it's annoying though what this guy does next, because he did something that I don't agree with, and then he tries to make out that God is all about resurrection, so God will resurrect your life, even though it makes no sense, because that's got nothing to do with not paying off a mortgage.
That word life in the original language is interesting. That word life actually in the original language, it's not like a Zoe life, what we see in John 10:10, where Jesus says, I've come to give you life and life in the abundance. That's a Zoe life. That word life in the original Greek actually translates closer to psyche. You have to lay down your psyche, your mentality, your mindset, your paradigm, your ways of doing things, pick up your cross, which is a torture instrument, and follow Jesus.
My advice would only be to take a mortgage out if you really, really need to. Okay, if you want to go into the property development business and start buying houses and selling them, well, mortgages should actually be quite good for that, because you just buy it, you renovate it, and then you sell it. But you have to know that it's a dangerous market, because often the houses don't sell for what you think they are. Often you get carried away and start filling the house up with marble that you can't afford to pay off, and then you find that you actually haven't made back the mortgage. So you've really got to be smart when it comes to taking out mortgages. And if you don't think you're smart, don't put yourself through that. If you don't think that, you know, I don't want to do massage, I want to stop massage, and because of that I don't actually like the idea of having a mortgage. Why? Because I'd feel like I have forced myself to become a masseuse and forced myself to have to do massage just to pay off the mortgage. You know, I did it at the very beginning because I needed somewhere to live. I couldn't work in my parents' house. My parents was a hoarder, and it was actually very embarrassing. And also to know that I was God and living in such a terrible state with my parents. You know, I moved out because I knew that I was God, and it seems stupid for God to be living with her parents when she's 26, whilst also knowing that her parents are completely mad, always insulted. My dad was always insulting me for not having a proper job, but would never tell me how to get a proper job, or tell me, make any attempt for me to get a proper job. You know, he would always just be like, oh, get a proper job, and then just walk off. Like, he doesn't say much, he's autistic, he doesn't say much, but, you know, doing things my way should be that you shouldn't take on responsibilities if you don't believe that you can pay it back. And if you do believe you can pay it back, you still need to be smart with how you do things, and don't take out 2 mortgages if you can't pay, if you don't think you can pay for one, and don't just assume that you can take out a mortgage, buy a house, rent it out, and it'd be fine. Because what happens if they don't start paying the mortgage? You know, what are the laws? I mean, if there are stupid laws that say that people can just live there without paying the rent, you know, that is a concern. Don't go for the house. If they're making laws like that, do not buy that house. If you're buying a house with the sole intention to rent it out, but the government have made some stupid law saying that if the family in there has young kids, they don't have to pay the rent, don't buy a house there, because that is the most ridiculous, unfair rule that there can be. You know, if that family can't afford to pay the rent, they need to be forced to pay the rent, or to move to somewhere smaller and have to live in more suffering conditions. Why? Because it's their fault for not learning how to pay the rent. You know, you can't just say, oh, we'll let you off, because there's other people that would have wanted that house. You know, maybe as a person has 6 kids and can't afford to pay the rent. Well, it's your fucking fault for having 6 kids. You know, just don't do this. If you made people suffer for having 6 kids, then they would know not to have 6 kids, and then maybe the world's population wouldn't be as drastically awful as it is, because of the huge number of animal souls that have been forced into human bodies because of this overpopulation. Now, if you made people suffer, you'd actually make people think, and you'd actually make people worried about not paying the rent, about not paying the bills, and laws should be, you know, as Egypt as well. It's another rule that I was thinking yesterday, that they've got this rule where if you have a completed house, you have to pay a lot of tax on it. So almost every house in the sort of where I went, basically, they all had like unfinished tops on it, and it just looked hideous. It looked ugly. You turn your country into something that looks hideous and ugly, like it's not finished, and you've done all that just to stop people, just to try and help, but you're not helping. You've just made your country look ugly by saying that. You know, you make the taxes low so that they make the houses look pretty. Say that you should charge taxes if the houses aren't unfinished. You know, unfinished houses look ugly, so you should be putting a tax on that, not putting a tax on finished houses. You know, encourage people to make their houses look nice. Don't encourage people. I think everything is just done so wrongly here, and then you've got preachers that try and teach people my way, even though they have no clue who I am, and it's just so freaking frustrating.
Be willing to suffer, because in that we see the beauty of the story of the rest.
Yeah, be willing to suffer. If you can't afford to buy a 6-bedroom house, don't buy a 6-bedroom house. If you can't afford to have 2 houses because you can't pay the mortgage, don't it. That's what suffering means. It means making sacrifices so that you know you can do the right thing, and paying off mortgages and buying a house saying we can pay this much, we're going to pay this much. You've taken that house from other people that would have wanted that house, so you've done that. You've taken this property off someone else that would have wanted it, and therefore you have to make a commitment to that property and to the people that you borrowed money from, and say, I will pay them back because that is the right thing, and other people would have wanted this house, and they would have paid less if I hadn't have made this bid. So if you're it's like buying something on eBay. If you're buying something on eBay and you've agreed to pay a huge amount, and then you suddenly change your mind and say, I don't want it. Okay, it's happened to me a couple of times, I have to admit, because I bidded for a few things and then ended up winning like 6 of the same item at the same time. Well, that hasn't happened that bad, but it's sometimes I bid for 6 things and I never get anything, and knowing that I won't get anything. But sometimes I end up winning 2 of the same item when I didn't think that would happen. So that I can be a little bit better, but it's different with a small item. You can't do that with properties, and part of thinking like me is knowing what I think and how what I agree with. So this is why I'm saying this.
Resurrection of Jesus. This is a foreshadowing, in my opinion, of the child dying. We see Jesus, the man who was innocent, who lived the life that we could never live, who died the death that we should have died on the cross in our place for our sins, and then is resurrected to reconcile us back in a right standing with God, and then cause us to go and be ministers of reconciliation in 2 Corinthians.
First, you need to meet me, you need to know me, you need to know what I think and stuff like this.
In chapter 5. And all of this had to shift my thinking. Romans 8:11 says, but if the spirit of him who raised Jesus from the dead dwells in you, he who raised Christ from the dead will also give life to your mortal bodies through his spirit who dwells in you.
That is a very misleading sentence, because he who raises him up, that's not talking about God. That's talking about the people that help give me promotion. That is the people that help tell people that I am God, not them. And this one, in a way, it actually sounds like the people helping me are being turned into God. He who raises him up, what was the one? He who raised Christ up from the dead, it's not from the dead, but I feel dead right now, will also give life to your mortal bodies. So you need to give life to other people by telling them my thoughts and okay, I'm not always going to be right, but I do think that you shouldn't take out a mortgage unless you can pay for half of it. My mum helped me buy half this house, and okay, she only did it because I spent 3 years lying in a bed believing that people were going to help me, hence I didn't need to work, hence I was just living off my savings. And then I realised that they weren't going to help me, and then I was just like, well, now I can't afford to buy a house, and therefore my mum needed to help me. But yes, and also it's annoying because if I had bought this same property 3 years earlier, I would have been able to afford it. Why? Because back then my rent, I had about 70,000, and this house was actually worth about 39,000. And in the 3.5 years that it took me to buy this house, this property had gone from 40,000 to 105,000, and my money had gone from 70,000 to 50,000. So yes, if I would have bought this property in 2013, when I was looking for properties, but then I gave up because I realised that was Christ. I also realised that was cursed, but I also realised that millionaires were doing things about me behind my back, and I thought they would help me. But guess what? 11 years later, they still haven't. But anyway, I've got my house, and my mum helped me buy half, and I think that is a sign that you too should only get a property if you own at least half of it. Although I own a quarter of my sister's, but that is slightly different because there was 3 of us and it's a second home and we were renting it out. But I have actually been put in a problem with it. My sister is incompetent. I didn't realise that. My sister's partner, who's definitely wasn't incompetent, his name was on the mortgage, but when the divorce happened, well, there's no mortgage. There was no mortgage on it. It was on the house, but when he came off it, it basically meant that I was the only one who had responsibility to try and make sure the rent was paid and stuff like this. Technically, though, because there's no mortgage, if they don't pay the rent, I'm not going to be in debt. But yeah, I own a quarter, and yet I have to do all the work. And so I have found myself in a horrible situation with that, because I only make £2,000 a year from the rent, and yet I have to be the one that does all the repair, does all the fixing, and my sister doesn't do anything. She doesn't even think the lawn needs to be mowed or anything like this. And yes, but you know what? I have taken on responsibility, even though I'm only owning a quarter, hence not making that much money on it. I have taken on the responsibility, and my sister wants to take out another mortgage, and she's happy to. She's serious. She seriously wants to take out a £300,000 mortgage to buy a third property, even though she has no intention to look after the current property. And her goal would be to rent out this new property and then get my mum to live in the flat that she's in right now, and expect my mum to pay the rent. And she thinks that she'll be able to pay the mortgage of her big nice house that she wants, using the rent money that she's going to force my mum to pay for living there. Okay, my mum's stupid for agreeing to this because she's got her own flat in Hampstead, which is a much nicer location, hence she does not need to live in Hawley by herself in a small flat, when she can live in Hampstead for no money at all. You know, I don't know why she would want to pay £12,000 a year to my sister. My sister's going to use that money to pay for the mortgage of the second house. But you know what, she is making some very bad decisions to just take that and just say, oh, it's all my mum's fault, or it's all other people's fault, or oh look, they've got the name wrong, it's not my responsibility. You know, to do things like this is, people need to be smart. This is my way of thinking. And he's not teaching how to be smart. He's just teaching, I'm going to make up some fiction about what Jesus believes, and I'm going to promote it. And I don't know how this scripture relates to what he's talking about. He who raised Christ up from the dead will also bring life to your mortal body. So he's just saying, just rely on God. Do whatever you want, and God will raise you up. When actually the people that raise up Christ are the people that help promote me as being Christ. And I guess bankers might be one of those people. Yes, I'm pretty sure bankers will be one of those people. And yeah, bankers are not going to look with as much favour on you as they would on me. Why? Because I'm not the one that's planning on just borrowing money off them and not repaying them back. Whereas you people who would take out mortgages and think that you can just not pay them back, you know, you are the ones that are. Although I know the rich people are doing that too, though. I heard that the guy who owns Apple or something, I don't know, maybe it's one of the computer systems, he does that. He keeps taking out more and more mortgages, and never pays tax because his stocks in the company that he has are so high that he just lives off mortgages. But the banks are confident that he'd be able to pay them back, because all he'll need to do is sell off some of his stocks of the company. And I think that was quite a smart move, though. But I think, though, he wasn't doing it to cheat the banks. He's not doing it to cheat people. He's just doing it because he doesn't want to pay tax. And I understand why people don't want to pay tax. Why? Because I don't believe that the people who run the government are really dealing with tax in the right way. You know, if you're making stupid decisions that say that people don't have to pay the mortgage or pay the rent, you know, if you're doing things like this, then you're actually turning against the banks who want their debts to be paid off. And so it's complicated, and I shouldn't talk too much about it because I don't really know.
God has the power to bring life out of death, to restore.
What the hell has that got to do with people paying off their mortgages? It's like killing people, just die, but you won't get your mortgage back if you're dead.
Restore what seems lost when we trust him fully. Sometimes God may
You should not trust someone you know nothing about.
allow situations in your life to die in order to display his restoration and resurrection power. And here's my opinion.
I display my resurrection power through reincarnation. That's got nothing to do with people not paying off their debts. That's basically just saying to people that if you have large debts, don't worry, just kill yourself and God will bring you back in a new body and you'll no longer have debts to pay. That's not how it works in my books, because I think if people are going to be getting themselves into high debts, they're having a life that they shouldn't be living. You know, they've spent all this money, they've enjoyed all the luxuries that they've had, having a nice car and having nice parties and nice this, nice that, and they've done all this with the sole intention to never pay off their debts. And I think that's wrong. I think if you're taking out mortgages because you've got a big stake in a company, well, the banks know that the second you die, they're going to get their money back, because they'll probably just sell off your stocks and get the money back that way. So they're probably more safer bet. But yeah, if you're having a nice lavish lifestyle and you die and you don't have anything to pay back your debts or pay off your debts, then it's just like they're not going to be happy, because they're going to want to start. I've heard that they try and take the loans off family members or something, but that can't be right. There has to be people. It has to be agreement but yeah, it's just, people shouldn't be allowed to have an amazing life, rack up into massive debts, and then just kill yourself, and with no intention to pay the debts back. People should not be allowed to do that. If you're the sort of person that wants to do that, then I think there must be some sort of karma that prevents people from happening. You know, God is a real thinking person, and I know how real thinking people think, and therefore I would design karma to try and be as fair as possible, and to not allow people just to have amazing lifestyles at the cost and expense of everyone else.
Out of this understanding, this should lead us to be more open-handed with our time, talent, and treasure. Out of this understanding that God is in the business of resurrection and restoration, we should be open-handed with our time, our talent.
Okay, I'm going to stop now. This restoration and resurrection is only about people dying and coming back to life. But yeah, if you've died and you haven't paid off your debts, I feel like there must be some sort of matrix way of knowing how much debt you are actually in, and rewarding people who don't die with debt, and people who do die with debt, but the debt can be paid off through their, say if they owe £100,000 and their house is worth £100,000, well, their debt is paid when they die. You know, the bank gets everything, family members get nothing, because there is nothing left after the debt has been paid off. You know, I think that's a fair way of, that is a fair system. You know, if someone dies with a huge amount of debt, the debt collectors just take off their house and take off it, and therefore that person dies with no debt. But yeah, if a person dies with £100,000 debt and they've been renting in a house all their life, hence they own nothing, you know, and say that there is only like £1,000 in their account, then that's unfair, because they've had to spend all that money with money that they've spent so much money that other people should have wanted, should have had some should have had more right to, because they didn't deserve that loan, they didn't deserve to be given that money, and therefore some sort of punishment needs to be given, so that, you know, maybe in their next life they'll be given to people who are also in debt and can't offer them anything, or maybe one of those people that have like 20 kids and have hardly any money to be able to look after 20 kids. That's totally wrong, and you shouldn't. But yes, if you die with a huge amount of debt, and I have to put you back into a human body because you're too smart for an animal body, you know, that is the sort of life I would be giving you. I'd be putting you into a body with someone who has no money, or isn't going to have much of an opportunity to get money because of your bad circumstances. And I feel like this is a way of balancing the overly good circumstances that you had before, even though you didn't deserve it, because you weren't thinking about how to pay off the debt, even if your debt died. You know, if you have massive debt and you do have large amounts of money in the stock market or whatever, you know, the banks or some computer system company, might have been I don't know. There's loads of people that work in these companies, so I don't know who it was. Yes, if you can pay off debts, then it's fine to have a lavish lifestyle. But if you can't pay off debts, then don't do it.